So at this time, I'd like to ask a dear friend of mine, new friend, old friend. We've known each other for a while, but got to know each other better over the last several months. Mr. Bob Walker from Walker Manufacturing. Bob, as it's a theme here at the prayer breakfast that we obviously bring in some pretty phenomenal speakers from across the country, but we also want to make sure that we recognize the phenomenal stories within the community. If you know anything about Walker Manufacturing, you know that they embody what it means to lead with a servant's heart. Their organization is just like a shrine on the top of a hill that people look at and say, hey, what's their secret? What are they doing? How do they get their employees to stay so long and be so happy? Why are they so giving and loving? Well, gosh, guys, they live and breathe everything that's in that book, the best business book that was ever written. And if it was bound with a different cover, it would be read by everybody. So I have the distinct honor of welcoming Bob Walker to the stage as the chairman of Walker Manufacturing. Bob has a hidden talent, maybe not to some that know him. He's also a very talented vocalist and sings bass in his church choir and leads the congregational hymns on Sunday mornings. They have an on-site chaplain at Walker Manufacturing. They live their faith every day. They wear it on their sleeve, and they are unoffended. Bob and his wife Barbara have been married for over 57 years, have 3 married daughters, and 9 grandchildren. Unless in the last 15 minutes or so a 10th or 11th showed up, I'm not sure. But you're building, these are the people that you want to keep reproducing because you know that they're going to flood our community with the right spirit of forgiveness, of redemption, and of salvation. Will you join me in welcoming Bob Walker to the stage?
Thank you for that introduction. It's quite an excuse me, quite an opportunity to be able to be here and tell you a little bit of our story and some of the things we've learned along the way. And particularly when it comes time to try to apply our faith to our work and the way we handle ourselves in our company, this is what I want to talk with you about and share with you here briefly. I think this is the largest group that I've ever had the chance to or opportunity to speak to, but I've met with all kinds of groups, and every time somebody invites me, I try to put my hand up and say, okay, I'll share. Because, so I'm ready for a first slide, if whoever's run the slides. Okay, thank you. Well, that's me. And let's go to the next slide. Well, that's my dad. And I want to start the story by talking about him quite a bit, because he's got us started in business. My dad was a farmer in Kansas, close to Dodge City, Kansas, if any of you know where Kansas is. And he worked on a family farm with my grandpa and 2 uncles. About 500 acres is what was being farmed, and this is during the 40s and 50s. But my dad began to understand and see that the family farm wasn't going to support 4 families. Farming was getting bigger and bigger, and farmers, there were fewer and fewer farm people actually able to make a living on a farm. And my dad became interested, or was interested in building and designing and building equipment. He worked on farm equipment first of all, but then later he was challenged by a friend of his who said to him, if you'll build a gasoline-powered golf car, I'll sell them for you. Well, my dad never really played golf. He never really even cared about golf, but he did take the challenge to build a golf car. And you can see the picture of his handiwork there. And it was a product of its era. And if you remember 1957, that's when cars had tail fins. And this golf car had French curves on it. Most golf cars were a little boxy type vehicles, but this one had some curves, and that helped create some eye appeal or curb appeal to people who wanted to drive around in something that was different than the typical golf car. My dad got working in the farm shop, which was a converted chicken coop, a very small little building. And if you could have seen where he was working and then look at this beautiful finished product, you wonder, how did he do that? But he did. He had an eye for detail. Some of the very first, you see there's lots of curves. Some of the first work, there was a big mulberry tree out by the farm shop, and some of those tubing items were shaped in the fork of the tree before he got the tooling built to make that. So very humble starts in manufacturing. By 1960, Dad constructed a little building close to our farmhouse, and that became our first manufacturing location. We think about 1,000 golf cars were produced from 1957 to 1963. And in 1963, my dad, actually a little before that, became interested in, let's go to the next slide. He became discouraged with golf cars because they were only for golf. And he got the vision of making a little vehicle that would be multi-purpose. It could be used for many different kinds of things. And there you see the result of that work. And sure enough, it was a multi-purpose vehicle. One entrepreneur even bought some of these and put a little oven on the back and had a pizza delivery system worked out. So that was another version of it was a floor scrubber. Put some brushes up on front and water tanks on the back with squeegees, and you could scrub a concrete floor with this vehicle. Anyway, the company, the golf car project, was sold to some other people in Kansas, and Dad took the money from that sale and invested into the little truck business. And from there, 1962 up to 1968, the little trucks were produced there in Kansas. Again, we think about 1,000 of them were produced. Interestingly enough, today with the internet, you can do a search on the web for Walker Executive Golf Car or Walker Power Truck, and sure enough, some of these vehicles are still will show up on a website with owners, either collectors or some people still have these vehicles and are using them after 60-some years. So it's interesting to trace that out with today's searchability on the internet. Anyway, the little truck, in 1968, my dad, under quite a bit of load of debt and just general conditions in trying to manufacture in Kansas, he sold the whole company to a group of investors up in Casper, Wyoming. And the whole company then moved from Kansas to Wyoming in 1968. For a couple years, the company operated under new ownership or new leadership. My dad went along with the new company as a product developer, and that's what he liked to do, and so he was very happy to have that role. But after a couple years, under new management and new financing, the company went into bankruptcy. And my dad had stock in the new company, and he lost everything at that point. My brother and my youngest sister, they were still at home. I was in college by that time, so I didn't really experience that hard time like they did. But my dad liked to say, I've lost everything except my family and my faith in God. That's all that's left. So he went to work. There was talk about refinancing the company and getting started again, and Dad waited for a period of time, but he finally took a job as a welder in a construction company, a building company, and that's what he was doing to pay the bills for about a year while he waited for something to happen with the little truck business. And that's another story to tell you very quickly. My dad tells the story after waiting and working in this building company. One day, the foreman told my dad to get down in the ditch. They were getting ready to pour a footing for a new building, and there was some loose dirt in the footing area. And they told my dad to take a shovel and get in and clear out the loose dirt, which he did. He said the wind was blowing like it does in Wyoming, and every every shovel full. It seemed like the wind blew the dirt back in the footing. And he said, I prayed a little prayer. Lord, I'm 48 years old. I've worked hard all my life. Is this where I'm supposed to end up? And he said, at that day, when he went home, there was something in the mail. Unfortunately, I didn't get a clear understanding of what that was, but something came in the mail that began a new opportunity for us and for him. And that's the next slide. That's on top of that operator cab is a bi-cool unit, a cooler unit for tractor cabs or operator cabs. There was a company in Greeley called NoCO. There were two partners, Berner and Yost. Some of you in this room probably will know and remember those men. But Mr. Berner had known my dad from Kansas days, and knowing he was out of business and not able to do anything, he approached my dad. He said, we're selling tractor cab coolers. They're not working very well. Could you come up with a new design of a tractor cab cooler? My dad accepted the challenge. He did, and somehow, and that's another part of the story, I don't know quite how to explain it, but somehow my dad went to the bank and talked them into letting him have access to his tools. You see, when the bankruptcy came, the bank came along and locked up the building, which included a lot of my dad's tools. But in order to build a prototype cooler, Dad somehow talked the bank into opening the door back up and letting him inside to build a prototype. Once he got the prototype done, there was a patent. The design got a patent, and Dad sold the patent to the people in Greeley and took the money from the sale of the patent and went and bought his tools back from the bank and reopened to manufacture tractor cab coolers. So that's how we got from golf cars to power trucks to tractor cab coolers. We built about 70,000 tractor cab coolers for the next, from 1972 to 1983. That was our main business. That's what we were doing when we moved here to Fort Collins. In 1974, my parents loaded up the operation there in Casper and moved here to Fort Collins to reopen and manufacture coolers. The main purpose for coming here was to get closer to the people in Greeley, who was our only customer at that time, and also to be closer to Denver, which is the logistic hub for this whole area as far as manufacturing type, the kind of manufacturing that we're doing. So that's what we were doing when we built our first lawnmower prototype. That is, we were making tractor cab coolers. Well, there's a picture of the three of us. My dad, he passed away in 2011, but there's a picture of Dean and I. Dean's 5 years younger than I am, and but I have more hair right now, which is not a lot. But there's a picture of the prototype lawnmower. How did we get into the lawnmower idea? Well, we were just minding our own business, making tractor cab coolers, and one in spring of 1977, my dad and I both bought a couple riding lawnmowers, thinking we were going to improve our lifestyle by having a riding lawnmower instead of a walk-behind mower. After we purchased these mowers and used them for a few weeks, we began to talk to each other, and he had one and I had one. We both lived in Loveland and had oversized lots that we were mowing, and had been using push mowers for all the earlier years. But anyway, once we got the riding mowers, we discovered wasn't working very well on our property. The maneuverability of the typical little riding lawnmower in those days had a steering wheel and a gear shift and a foot pedal clutch. And it was a real adventure trying to maneuver around a yard with trees and flower beds and irregular shapes. We began to say to each other, we've made a bad mistake. We should have stayed with our push mowers, our walk-behind mowers, instead of these riding mowers. But that gave us an idea. We said, we think we can build a better mower than what we bought. So sometimes if you can't buy it, build it, and so we did. That's our little slogan. And so within a few weeks after we made that decision to try to build our own lawnmower. Here was the result of that work. My brother took the lead, and then working with my dad and myself, constructed this first little prototype. That's my daughter on the seat there in front of my house in Loveland. She's a little over 50 years old now, so you can tell it was a long time ago. But we're making tractor cab coolers, and we're making a living doing that, but this allowed us the opportunity to experiment with lawnmowers. Next slide. This is our third prototype. We built it in 1979. And we built 3 prototypes. Each time we learned more, and we had no experience designing lawnmowers, so we began to learn about that by building prototypes. But this third prototype we took to a farm show in Kansas as a marketing test. We wanted to see what the farmers would think of the product, and we had nothing to sell them. We just had this one prototype, and some of the farmers were a little upset with us for displaying at a show and not having anything to sell. They weren't that happy to know. But we got enough interest that we came home, and the next year, 1980, we built 25 machines that look a lot like this one in the picture. They were all yellow, just like that one in the picture, and we've stayed with that yellow color all these years. But anyway, the 25 machines, then it took us about a year to build 25, and it took us 2 years to sell 25 because we had no dealers or distributors, or nobody had ever heard of a Walker mower. And so it was a very slow start, but that got us started. We had a little area in our workshop, along with manufacturing the coolers, where we were building lawnmowers. And but in 1983, the company in Greeley got it was a time of recession, and they had needed to do some refinancing. And so when they did, they brought in a new business partner who decided that they were going to manufacture their own coolers over in Greeley, and we lost our contract in 1983. We had to go full-time in lawnmowers in 1984 to survive. There was nothing left for us to do except try to build lawnmowers. And somehow or another, we managed to build 450 machines that year, and we sold every one of them and got paid for every one of them. I can tell you we nearly went broke again. Been broke once, but on paper, we shouldn't have survived that. We didn't have enough money. We only had a couple $100,000 in savings, and my dad went and mortgaged his house in Loveland for another 100 and some thousand. The bill of materials for 450 lawnmowers at that time would have been about $700,000. How did we do that? Well, there's only one answer. That's the Lord helped us survive. Today, this is turned, we've now found a wonderful opportunity after all those early years and struggle. I forgot to just say, my dad, 13 years after starting the company, 13 years later, he's bankrupt. And I like to talk about this part of our story with you because some people in successful businesses don't want to talk about failure. But I think it's very important to talk about failure because it's a reality of businesses that sometimes they fail. In fact, I think if you'll go in and trace the history of a lot of companies that are successful today, somewhere in their history there was a bankruptcy or a time they nearly went bankrupt or had a tremendous loss. And we certainly have lived there. But one thing I'd like to just say to you is, Dad and Dean and I, we never talked about failure, even though it was certainly in a possibility. There was no bank guarantees or any government guarantees for businesses like yours. If you fail, you fail. But we never talked about it. We just somehow felt and knew that we had an opportunity that we would succeed. And I just like to again emphasize that successful companies, and even those who are founded on, that's another important point, is you say, well, you were trying to serve the Lord. How come you failed? That's not for me to answer. It just happens sometimes. But one thing that happens too is that you learn a lot. And in the course of living through a rough time, you also grow in your dependence on the Lord and on Him helping us. Next slide. This is a picture of our factory today, 216,000 square feet, and the buildings there. We're on 50 acres of ground. You can see some nice green. Those are test areas for lawn mowing, where we are able to grow nice grass and be able to test our lawnmowers. This is a slide where we celebrate our 100,000th machine in August of 2008. Today we're at about 185,000 machines have been produced and sent around the world. That's another interesting thing to mention to you is we export about 1/4 of the Walker mowers that we build are sent outside the United States. So we're trying to do our part to help balance trade a little bit. This is one of our assembly lines. We have 3 of them, 2 tractor lines and 1 deck, and this is our assembly building. We make 30 machines, currently are making 30 of these machines every day, and that allows us to build almost 7,000 machines this year and sell them. We have some really nice equipment in our factory, and this is just a picture of our new laser cutting center where a lot of our parts now are cut out in flat sheets with laser cutters, 2 of them. These are 10,000 watt laser cutters, and they cut amazingly fast, the parts. You ought to come and take a tour and see them at work. This is a picture of our storage area for finished machines. We have an area there that can hold, in the wintertime, we can hold up around 1,000 machines in storage in the off season. Let's see what the next slide is. Okay, yeah, this is kind of, I want to change this. I've told our story, and I just kind of want to now talk about this little section here. I've got this card. You don't have cards on your table, but we do have a table outside in the hallway. And if you're interested in having one of these after the meeting is over, we're going to be out there and we'll be able to have you take one of these. This is our belief statement. There's 18 beliefs that we've written down on these cards, and we give these cards to our new employees and others who come for a visit to our factory. We want people to know what our principles are. And I'd like to tell you that this was put together not by a committee or a focus group or somebody like that. Dean and I simply sat down after we lived our experiences across the years. My brother and I sat down and wrote what we believe are the things we've learned as principles. And so then they were put together into this card. I want to say to you, there's none of this really has scripture quotations to it, but I would say all of it, or most all of it, is based on principles that are found in the Bible. Some people like to say, well, the Bible is not a book about business, it's a book about salvation, and they're right. It's God's story of salvation for His people. That's the Bible. But contained therein are all the great principles, I believe, for successful living and success in business and other enterprise, other ways that people need to are working. These principles come from the right place, and they stood the test of time. We're not saying we have all the principles that everybody needs, but these are just some that, again, we've lived. We've lived them before we wrote them down. That's a good way to say that. I want to take time now to go through. I'm not going to go through all 18 of these. It'd take too long. But I picked out some, and I'm trying to, by reading these to you, I think you'll be able to see them on the screen too. I have several here I'm just going to talk about with you on what and yeah, you should be able to read that. The first one, the very top line is, operate by principles that are optimum for employees and their families. And how do we do that? What do we do that particularly is optimum for people, our people? Well, one thing we do is what we call level manufacturing. We're producing a seasonal product, But level manufacturing basically says we're going to make product every day of the year and at a steady rate. And since it's a seasonal product, that means sometimes of the year we're building product that's not going to sell immediately. It has to be stored somewhere for a while before it's sold. But nevertheless, our schedule sets up so that we, other than vacation times in the plant in August and between Christmas and New Year's, every work day, every week we build lawnmowers. Doesn't matter what, and we build them at about the same rate, in this year, about 30 per day. Why is that a big deal? Why is that optimum for people? Well, it means everybody has a full-time job at the company. Everybody has, there's no seasonal or temporary workers. Everybody comes to work every day. Everybody has a job. Turns out nobody has a part-time life. Everybody has a full-time life, and they need a full-time job. We're not here to criticize people who run seasonal businesses. We understand there's some that's the way they have to operate. But we felt like we had a choice. And if we could live this and work this way, it would be best for our employees. Because everybody, again, needs a job they can depend on. We also don't work shifts. We just work one long shift, a 9-hour day, but we don't have a night shift or any other shifts. We do that deliberately because shifts are hard on families. There's no way around it. When you work shift work, it's hard to have your family life. So we don't do that. We believe that strong companies come from strong employees, and strong employees have strong families. And so anything we can do to strengthen our families actually strengthens the company, and we benefit from it as well as our families. We think employees these days need good medical insurance. We don't need the government to tell us what we need to do there. We need to take care of our families by having good insurance. It's expensive, but it's good, and it needs to be a part of, at least in our case, it needed to be a part of what we did to be optimum for our employees. Next slide. Pursue excellence in all your work and without excuse. The results of this pursuit are easily seen in every part of the business and in all relationships, both inside and outside the company. On this particular one, you probably shouldn't do this. I've been told you shouldn't. But try to apply some of what Jesus did and try to figure out what it would look like today. So it's my imagination at work. But we pretty much know that Jesus grew up working with his father Joseph in the carpentry business. We don't know exactly what they produced. I've read sometimes that they produced agricultural tools like plows and things that they used for preparing for growing, sowing fields for agriculture, like a tool. But they also may have made furniture too, tables and chairs. That's another thing you could imagine. But what I like to think about is excellence. I think Jesus made really good stuff, and Joseph, out of their carpenter shop. It was high quality, great value for the customer, and he wouldn't have put his name on anything less than that. I think Christian people should be producing some of the very best of the best in whatever endeavor there is in their life. I know it's not just production, there's also service, but service is another way to do the very best that can be done. And so that's my imagination at work, but I think it guides us, or helps us. We try to build good stuff that we always say we'd like to build something that we would like to buy ourselves. And we just happen to have a taste for good equipment. And so we try to make lawnmowers that we would like to buy ourselves. I'm trying to keep my time on discipline here. Next slide. Remember where your help and your blessings come from. live and work with gratitude for all the Lord has done for us. Being thankful, living with gratitude, this is, the Lord has done so much for all of us. If you count it that way, we can never outgive the Lord in terms of us trying to give back and being generous. I like to think that gratitude and generosity are two sides of the same coin. That is, if you understand all the blessings you've received, then you become a generous person because you say, well, the Lord has given to me, I'll give back. My dad always liked this verse in Psalm 121. I will lift mine eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And that's a good word to us in the way we handle ourselves. People can tell, I think, when you're a person that lives with gratitude, it's just a natural part of your conversation. You should, some people like to use the word lucky. I like to use the word blessed. Some people like to talk about how their windfall. I like to talk about the Lord's blessings. And that should just be a natural part of our conversation as we follow Jesus. That's one of the things I meant to say earlier. I'll just bring it out at this point. I'm not a big fan of the term Christian. Christian has been so used by so many people of all different kinds of persuasions, it's almost a generic term. I prefer and think we should really, the term Christ follower. I'm a person who follows Jesus. That's a title I would like to have, as opposed to saying, well, you're a Christian. It maybe didn't used to be that way, but it seems to me like in our world we live in now, again, there's a lot of people that claim the name Christian, but they really don't practice following Jesus. Next slide. Never allow growth to be the main goal. It is an outcome from doing everything else right. In business, some businesses and some that we've talked to will tell you that growth is the main thing they think about. They set their goals. Their whole business operations are revolving around how much can we grow. We look at it the other way, which is expressed in this belief that if we'll do everything we do want to grow. We're not against growth, but we just want to arrive there because we've done everything else. We've done everything right. Everything we've worked as hard as we know how to work. We've taken every opportunity that we knew could find, and we've worked with diligence to carry out our opportunity. When we've done all of that, the growth takes care of itself. You'll get the growth. It'll come, but it won't be because you were laser focused on it. It'll be because you've done things right. I think that we should look at growth. I think more of a scriptural look at growth is multiplication. And a favorite story that we all enjoy is Jesus taking one little boy's lunch and feeding 5,000 people. That's multiplication. It kind of sets growth to the side. I mean, obviously the meal grew, but the bigger picture is that a lot of people were fed and blessed because of multiplication. So I think the Lord takes what we give him, and each one of us has a little lunch of some kind, and it's up to us to give that lunch to Jesus and say, yeah, I'll give my lunch, and the Lord blesses it and multiplies it. I also think he helps us multiply what he entrusts to us. That is, each of us is entrusted with something or some things, and the Lord, as we give and ask him to help us, he does help us, and it's multiplication. That's one of my favorite, when somebody asks the big question, why are you in business? And a typical answer might be, well, I'm in business to make a lot of money. But to me, that's not a very satisfying answer. I think the better answer is I'm in business to create multiplied opportunities, not only for myself, but for a whole bunch of other people. And in the lawnmower business, I'll just trace it out for you very quickly. Yes, we have our direct employees, about 215 people that work in the company right now making lawnmowers. But the picture, and that's a nice size, and you could say that's a nice business, but it's much bigger than that. Every day we have in the states of Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, we have companies that are producing component parts that we use in our to make our lawnmowers. And there's jobs there. There's people that have jobs making things that we bring into our factory and assemble to make finished machines. We also have truck drivers that bring the stuff from them to us. There's about 15 a day, trucks that come in and out of our factory. Somebody driving that truck has got a job because we needed to have them bring stuff to us. And then we have another group of truck drivers that take the finished products and deliver them back to the other direction. And then we have the people that buy the machines from us. We have a network of distributors around the world that distribute our product out to a network of dealers. There's about 45, 46 distributors around the world. Then there's about 1,200 dealers that sell and service our machines out in the territory. And then there's the people that buy the machines. About 2/3 of our machines are purchased by professional mowing people who actually mow properties and take care of properties, and using lawnmowers is their livelihood. That's how they live and how they're making their income. Those people are being fed, if you will, off of the fact that we made the lawnmowers. They put them to work, and they're making their livelihood. Now you multiply that out, and I like to say our company is feeding several thousand people. Let's just say thousands of people. And that's multiplied opportunity. That's what it's all about. And that's a lot more exciting than saying, how much money did you make? Yes, we're not afraid to talk about money and profit. You don't do business like we do here today without money and making money, but the bigger picture is the one that we enjoy. Next slide. The Lord's Sabbath day will be honored by resting from our work. This is a principle that we've tried to follow. And I would emphasize the idea that our observance of Sabbath is simply resting from our work. So we don't run our factory on Sundays. Sabbath day is the one we've chosen. Sunday is our day that we've chosen to rest out of the 7 days of the 7 days. I'm not here. Sometimes I've gotten into some people that thought I was a Seventh-day Adventist, and I'm not against Seventh-day Adventists, but again, to us, the day is, the resting is the most important part of this. In honor of our Creator, where we rest and stop production. We also try to do our best to stop promotion. If we have any promotion that we can turn on or off, we turn it off on Sunday. Sometimes when we've gone to trade shows to display our product on a national setting, and the trade show is held on a Sunday as one of the show days, we've been able to, across the years, been able to bow out of being there on Sunday. We have to ask permission, but we've gotten permission from the show sponsors, or we simply have not attended a show if they wouldn't work with us. But overall, a lot of our shows in some earlier years were, instead of being a 3-day show, it was a 2-day show. And you could say, well, that's crazy. You spent all that money to get there to show your product, and you're not going to be there one of the days. To us, we see all the right people in 2 days instead of 3. And it's worked for us. So I think I'm not telling you, there's a lot of variety in people's view on Sabbath day, but that's the way where we have arrived at it, and as I say, it's worked for us. Next slide. Well, this is a favorite. It's one of the shortest. It is the shortest one. Always love people, use money. Most of the time, or many times in business, it's the other way around. Use people and love money. And we like this idea about loving people. So some people would say, well, how can you be talking about loving people and be in business? That doesn't even make sense. Love is, what's that got to do with business? But if you define love as taking care of people, we think it's got a lot to do with how we handle ourselves as taking care of people. And after all, the commandment is there. When Jesus was asked about the great commandments, the second one, as the first, was to love your neighbor. And it certainly should be a foundational point of how you operate your business is to love people. And we all know what happens if you start loving money anyway. The Bible tells us how it's a destructive force, a terrible, terrible thing when people start loving money. And so we think that's getting our priorities right. Well, I'm wanting to remind you this little card is outside if you'd like to get one when you leave. Also, it's available on our website at walker.com. That's if you want to visit our website, Walker. It's that simple. Walker.com is where we live on the web. Also, I've written a book, so I'm here to promote my book. Not really, but we have a table set up outside, and you can get a book today if you're on your way out. If you'd like to have one, I'd love for you to have it. I've told you quite a bit of the story here, but there's more in the book than what I've talked about. If we happen to meet up outside, I'd be happy to sign the book for you as well. It'd be my pleasure. It's been my pleasure to talk with you. If you are interested and would like to see manufacturing at work, I invite you to, not all at once, but if a few of you wanted to come for a tour, we love to give tours. Even without any, sometimes we have people just walk in and say, I'm in town, I'd like to have a tour. We accommodate that kind of a visit. We also have planned visits. I'm just pleased to tell you, we really like to give tours to school-age kids. We think they need to see manufacturing. And a lot of the rumors are that manufacturing is not being done in the United States anymore, and that's not true. We do it every day at our factory. So if you've got some kids in a school group, or we have sometimes you'll see some school buses pulled up in front of our place with groups of kids that come for tours. One other thing to mention to you is next week on Friday is what we call Factory Day. It's an open house day at our factory, and you'd be welcome to come to that as well. There's no charge. You can just drive in and park, and you can walk. It's a self-guided tour through the factory. The factory is in operation pretty much on a factory day, but anyway, if you would like to do that, that's another invitation that I offer to you. Thank you.